As you know, it's a lot of fun to play jazz chords and check out beautiful progressions, and the best place to put those chords to work is in intros for songs. I'm gonna show you 7 common types of intros with some variations, but I'm also gonna show you some concepts that will really help you take them further and make them your own. And I'm gonna throw in some stories about how intros and beautiful harmony can get you in a lot of trouble with the singer.
Look at me! Look at me! Get the fuck out of my show right now!
Let's get nerdy with some jazz harmony. The first one is the trusted old 1-6-2-5, but I'm going to start by not using the 6 from the key and use a secondary dominant instead, because we want an intro to move forward and create energy that takes us to the song. Check out how I'm relying on top note melody here. I play the turnaround twice because I think a 4 or 8 bar intro just feels more natural. 2 bars feels a little bit short unless it's a ballad. Turnarounds are great for intros. They set up the tonality, the tempo and the mood, and you can do really a lot with them. They even work when you just use shell voicings, like this next example where I'm also adding a passing chord. Passing chords can be simple. Just think about them as chords sliding into the target chord. That's often easier than trying to explain them with a lot of complicated music theory. It's about how it sounds in the end. The trick to a good intro is probably to make it surprising enough without getting too vague. I still screw that up when I make intros now and again, but I also have to admit that I kind of like taking risks, and it kind of comes with the territory when you do. Let me show you 2 ways that you can make a turnaround intro a little bit more catchy. I'll add some passing chords, and notice how the C major 7 in the second turnaround is reharmonized with a chord that really wants to move on and resolve, which actually works really well for an intro. Now after this, I'm gonna show you a beautiful suspension idea that works well with turnaround intros. Let me just start with the substitution warning. Explaining everything in harmony with substitutions is really not that helpful. If you substitute chords, then there's supposed to be a link between the 2 chords, and that's just not always the case. Here, the B flat 7 that I use in the place of a C major 7 in the second turnaround is a really good example. It doesn't really make sense to call B flat 7 a substitution of a C major 7. It's just a different way of letting the harmony flow, and trying to force some sort of relationship between those 2 gets silly really fast. Now, in the first turnaround, I'm actually also using a B flat 7 as a passing chord, and that's a really good trick to know, moving from 1 to 6, and that works very often and it always sounds beautiful. Here's a great trick to avoid boring repeats of the turnaround. Then you can also choose to resolve after playing it once, but then suspend the resolution and the tonic chord. That sounds beautiful. I'm using a flat 6 and a flat 2 or a Neapolitan subdominant in this example, but there are other options that you can explore. These 2 chords are actually something that you want to remember because they're practical for a lot of things. I love that C major 7-13 sound. And I think this is also a really great way of arpeggiating chords, sort of with a string skip in there. Minor subdominants are amazing. They always sound great, and I'm gonna put them to use as a part of a modulation in sort of a very surprising and elegant example later in the video. But hang on to that flat 6 sound because that's already in the next example. And let's just admit it, intros are just an excuse to mess around with some great sounding harmony. It can be great to have turnarounds that sort of pretend to modulate, but then when you listen, they really don't. And here's one that I love to use. It's sometimes referred to as the Ladybird or Tad Dameron turnaround, but people also say that referring to sort of the all major 7 version, which I find a lot less appealing. This one takes a trip to the flat 6, which is a beautiful sort of very giant step sounding progression. And you can take this a bit further. In fact, you can take it really far. Check out this extended version of that concept, leaning heavily on giant steps combined with minor subdominant suspensions. This one moves around so much that I think it kind of works better when you're combining it with a more sort of standard turnaround, because otherwise it gets a bit too vague, but of course it's also still just a nice way to show off your skills with harmony. But instead of adding more and more chords, then you can of course also choose to use fewer chords and then repeat that as an intro. It's already in the name. Turnaround suggests movement, and if you reduce what is going on in the turnarounds that you've seen until now, then really it's just been ways to embellish a 1-5 progression. But instead of having a lot of movement and a lot of different chords, then you can also use fewer chords. But here the repeated 1-5 gets a little bit too boring, a little bit too predictable. You need to make sure that the chords are interesting enough if you do this. Now, an obvious option is using the 1 and then a tritone substitution of the 5. So in this case, D flat 7 instead of G7. And notice that I'm really approaching this as if it's a riff or a groove. I tend to think of these as setting up a groove until the melody begins, and I mostly use these when the first part of the melody fits over that groove, like I Remember April or Invitation. Now, not using something that is a dominant resolution often works better and avoids becoming boring, so a good option is another minor subdominant, the backdoor dominant. And an option that is maybe a bit more adventurous is using the Neapolitan subdominant, so D flat major 7. Both of these are fairly common with bossa novas, but even using all this amazing harmony, it quickly sounds very similar to how the song sounds, and maybe you want a different effect or sound. So that's where pedals become useful. The type of pedals that I'm talking about here are of course not reverb, delay, and overdrive, because I'm of course talking about pedal points. They're great for setting up tempo and tonality while also wanting to resolve, which really makes us want to hear the song begin. It is so strong that it in fact really got me in trouble one time on a gig. I'll get to that in a bit. Check out this example. Most of the time you use the 5th degree or the dominant as a pedal point. So in the key of C, that's a G, and that's also what I was using here. And then I was using the dominant chord and a suspended version of that to create movement over the pedal. But there are a few other great options to explore. You can shift the pedal point like this, which is what I call the TV game show pedal, and that may be a term that I invented. And borrowing from minor is just always a beautiful sound, also when it comes to pedal points. Here it sort of creates a sus4 flat 9 or Phrygian chord that you can sort of really sit on and then resolve to major. To me, the resolution to a major 7 chord when the whole thing sounds sort of dark and minor is really satisfying, and you can actually do it the other way around as well. But you can also go too far with the pedal point intros. On a gig that I did while I was studying, it was like a regular gig with a singer and a band every week. It was also quite long, and we did it for a long time, so I felt pretty confident just experimenting a bit. So one time before we were starting a song, I decided to set it up using a pedal point intro. So I used a B flat 7 sus4 as a pedal point for a song in C major, and without any preparation, that really didn't work. So we ended up adding a second intro, which was a 4-bar turnaround so that the singer could find the right key and get over the shock of that first change once we hit the theme. These pedal points have all been about using the dominant, so also really just relying on using dominant chords most of the time. But there's actually another way that you can use pedal points, so let's look at that. This type of intro combines turnarounds and pedal points. You play the 5th as a pedal note, and then you just play a turnaround over it. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Here's an example. Let me know in the comments what your favorite intro or progression is. Maybe there's something that I don't know. Maybe I can learn something new. That's always great. This is an important progression to know. It's kind of up there with the turnarounds. And weirdly enough, it's almost a complete overview of all the chord categories of tonal harmony. So you're kind of checking all the boxes when it comes to tonal harmony. You have the raised 4 half diminished. Then of course a 4 minor chord. Then this 3 chord, which is maybe like a 1 chord in an inversion. Then the sharp 4 diminished inversion, which is a flat 3 diminished. Then just a good old subdominant, the 2 chord. And then of course D flat major 7 as another minor subdominant before getting to the C major 7. And again, I'm using sort of this really nice major 7 with a 13. Sort of covers the whole spectrum except for the dominant. A common variation that you will see, especially when it's used as a reharmonization, is to turn this into a chain of 2 5s, which works really well and also kind of has that forward pull, that forward motion, but you kind of lose the ability to have the root in the melody all the time, which I think is a huge part of the sound. One of the most common intros is to use the ending of the form, either the last 4 or 8 bars to just set it up. There's a way to make this very, very surprising. In fact, getting into the you're fired surprising territory. But first, let's just check this out in the original version. As you can hear then, I'm using the last 4 bars of body and soul to just sort of set it up, and then when we go back to the beginning of the A, then the soloist would take over. And you don't always have to be as clear with the melody as I am here, but check out how you can use a flat 6 to have a great modulation in the intro. So again, this is something that I've had to explain to surprised soloists on gigs sometimes and talk my way out of getting fired, because it's kind of difficult to hear if you don't get a warning. This sounds amazing, and I'm sure you agree that it sounds beautiful. And the concept is actually pretty simple, even though I'm probably going to make a mess of explaining it. The intro that I'm playing, I'm choosing a different key because I'm choosing the key where D flat major is the flat 6. So I'm playing the last 4 bars of Body and Soul, but I'm choosing to play it in the key of F because that's the key where D flat is the flat 6. Now once I'm coming to the end of the melody, where it sort of goes down to an F where the melody ends usually, then I'm not playing an F major chord, I'm playing a D flat. So I'm suspending that with a D flat major 7, which sounds logical because it's the flat 6. But then that's actually the root. And now I'm just playing a 2/5 to go back to the beginning of the song. And then we're playing the whole song in D flat. So we get this modulation where I'm presenting the song, but it's in the wrong key. And I have a really elegant way of getting to the real key. As you can tell, I really enjoy exploring harmony and chords and finding new sounds. And you want to explore that. You want to learn what you can do with chords by adding interesting melodies, inner voices and suspensions. And that's what I'll talk about in this video, which is on a great exercise for really digging into chords and harmony. Check it out. Learn jazz, make music.